Thank you so much, and it's an honor and a pleasure to moderate this fantastic panel. And I think I'm most excited about the fact that there is no diversity on this panel, so which is a rarity, and it's a good one. It's a good problem to have once in a while. Otherwise, we're struggling with the reverse issue. But as we all know, women entrepreneurs in the energy sector are a largely untapped resource for driving innovation, fostering sustainability, advancing global energy goals, and yet we're seeing so many challenges in accessing the financing need to start these ventures, to support them, and to scale them. And I think we're seeing these challenges range from systemic biases, limited networks, lack of understanding of some of these models, as well as in general, restrictive funding outcomes, we would say, that often impede their progress. Today, we are here to actually understand from a very diverse group in the sense of our backgrounds on what are some of the changes that can be brought about to unlock the potential of women-led energy enterprises, and first to help them grow, to help them get that necessary support and funding. Let me actually start by getting in Henaz into the discussion. Henaz, first, if you could also focus a little bit about your role and what you do at USTDA, and especially, you facilitated many international partnerships. How can international development agencies play a role in fostering an ecosystem where we will see this trend accelerate?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shweta, for having me and No Diversity panel, a post-lunch panel, a very woman-focused audience, and thank you, USISPF, Ripu, for having me here, and thank you to my USAID colleagues, Aaron and Monali, for having me. I always wanted to speak at a SAVI panel, so, a dream fulfilled. When Ripu invited me for doing this panel, I was supposed to be in Chennai today. I just had a call with our Consul General in Chennai, and I said, 16th I come, and we'll do this project. And then Ripu's invitation follows 15 minutes later, and I declined Chennai. I postponed it. I said, I have been wanting to get onto a SAVI panel. So SAVI panel. So thank you, SAVI and SAVI, for having me here. I work for an agency called US Trade and Development Agency. We call ourselves, we are a sister agency of USAID, actually an offshoot of USAID almost 30 plus years ago, when there was a need in Washington by some of the policy makers to realize that it's important to also get the word trade with development attached. And that's how US Trade and Development Agency was born, to help the projects which, the massive development work which our USAID does, to bring along with the US industry and take it to some of those demonstration and pilot stages where industry was imperative for the implementation of those projects. And that was the genesis of the birth of USTDA as an independent agency of US government in early 1990s, and we started with water projects. And since then, we have done more than 4,000 studies globally. We are only at the grant stage. We do not work at the financing stage. But what we do is making projects financially implementable and bring it closer to an implementation stage, which is mostly needed when we work with a partner, for example, in India or elsewhere, that you have to get from the policymakers to the regulators, to the other stakeholders, to the procurement people, to the standards people, into the fold of how this technology of energy resilience or energy savings or smarter grids would move on. And our relationship with USAID also is as strong and as close for India. When USAID was doing its DRUM program for smarter grids, and some of you who've been in the energy system, because this is an energy audience today, would remember there were some projects which then needed implementation, where USTDA was brought in to start the work with New Delhi on the smart grid implementation program. Then it was New Delhi Power, and hence on moved to become Tata Power. And now they have a smart grid test lab and so on and so forth. So we have been here in India for the last 20 years, and we have funded more than 200 plus projects, of which 50% of our portfolio is with energy sector. And we're always looking for opportunity to connect the business partners of India and US together, hence working very closely on both the trade and development side to see implementable projects. And I would just add that gender was never our subject. Gender has never been our subject. We have only been very focused on looking at infrastructure. But having women leaders at US TDA, it's an agency which is very biased towards having more women than men. I don't know, maybe women are better project planners. And that's why a lot of us at the project planning stage are women, that we started looking at gender as a very important subject to cover the work which we do and how we do it. And I'll address some of those, Shweta, as we move on to the discussion. But probably, one of the things which I have seen and personally I have experienced working for US mission and US TDA or US government is, it's very difficult to have an audience like this in the room. It's absolutely unusual to have a tilt the other way. And that actually starts with the women ability and availability and the networking which is needed to really make these projects come at the forefront and then to see them as a success. It's fancier to announce tax rebates and, concessions and all for women-led projects, which it actually all starts with rooms like these, where we need to find more women, be it happening at the Oberoi in New Delhi, where a lot of us will be having our homes, but some of us may also have flown in to do that, or if it's happening in US or Europe, where some of you should have the ability to go and get there. And that's one of the biggest challenges which we face as a project planning agency working. I cover all of South Asia, but I can say with a lot of clarity and a lot of thought into it, that I see maximum challenge of getting women leaders on the table from India. And I wonder why, and I ask why, and that's also a question which we've been working with US-India Strategic Partnership Forum under our Climate Technology Action Group, where we want to make a conscious attempt of having women on the table. I don't know if there's a way we can mandate it, but it just doesn't happen naturally until and unless it's a women event. So I hope that changes with these dialogues.
No, 100%. I don't understand why people think that diversity and meritocracy have to be mutually exclusive. The two can go hand in hand. And I think the fact that you need a gender panel to get women out is in itself a problem we need to clearly address. Let me go to Vibhuti next. Vibhuti, you're the director for South Asia at the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. And naturally, as part of your role, you must be analyzing a lot of these energy investments that take place. Are there any trends you're picking up when you're seeing some of this? And, is it fair to have a bias of having women-led ventures? Or to your point, does that in itself become, in some ways, exclusionary instead of being inclusionary? And what role can institutional investors play to ensure that, yes, we are bringing in the necessary elements to make sure that there is a gender lens to investing, and yet it is not compromising meritocracy in any way?
Right. I think responding to your question, how do we, I think, firstly, we have been struggling in how to first mainstream climate finance. And now I think the question is, how do we mainstream women-led climate finance as well? So if you look historically, most of, while we do see a lot of change now happening, I have seen that shift in my 2 decades of working in this space, how they were initially very handful of women, whether it was technical role or whether even if it was research driven. I can say with a lot of great pride that I have seen that shift happening, in at least on the research side, in the CSO space, in the think tank space, that now there are more women participation than men. In my own organization, which is led by a woman, and even at the leadership level, 80% of us are women who are directors of different regions, so which is a very promising outcome that has happened. But still, I would say when we are talking about women participation in the entire workforce, I mean, it's only 40% if you look overall, but in the energy sector, it's only about 16%. So I think that's where the disparity still is there. While it has gone up, but the disparity is still huge. And in South Asia, it's even more. It's about 3 to 15% based on different geographies. So that's the part at the participation level. So historically, as I was saying, there has been, whether it was, women participation in the energy workforce or even from the financing. So I think there's a mindset change even when your banks, financial institution, venture capitalists are also all men. I think that there also we really need to enhance more women because that's when they'll understand what the needs are, how different they have to in terms of, when there are a lot of requirements which women cannot meet, and that also act as a bottleneck when it comes to access to finance. So we have kind of seen that at times, while it's not the ideal way, but some kind of reservation. Say even, it was only in 2013 when the company law board made it mandatory at least one woman on the board, one person on the board has to be a woman. That at least led that shift. Okay, at that leadership level, that's where you need to start involving more and more women. So some kind of making it a little bit more obligatory, even in terms of, when there are funds being established, from venture capitalists, especially for startups, because even in startups, we have seen the trend that it was only in the startup, only in 2017, 10% of the, startup was led by women, which has now gone up to 17% in 2022. But again, it's just a fraction if you talk about. And in terms of finance, again, especially in India, we have seen that 90% of the women workforce have still not been able to, are not part of the formal credit system. So as the requirements are such that it, they find it difficult. And when they get financed, either there's lack of financing on the first hand, and then secondly, they are being given at higher interest rate because they are perceived more riskier, which is, again, we need to demystify that myth, because clearly we have seen organizations or, the new ventures that have been led by women have resulted in better return to investors. So that is proven. Still, they are considered riskier. On the other hand, we have also seen less, fraud when the women are again leading the organizations. We have also seen that as I said, the return to investors have been much, much more. So I think we have to kind of address that risk, that it's not that they should be given at higher interest rate, and the requirement for collaterals is also really much more because they don't have enough collaterals to provide. Again, one more anecdote I want to give here, that something which has really helped in more and more women kind of owning the properties is the difference in the stamp duty rates. So a lot of families do prefer, registering a property in women's name because to gain that 1% differential. So that has promoted. Again, these are very small little things which have now really enhanced women's role in, having properties in their name, which can help them in getting more finance. But still, that's not something very widespread, but that's something one can look into it. And so these are some of my observations in terms of number, and specifically for institutional investors, I just want to say, if they can convince the, to have more women representation on the board. So ESG financing, which is your, and specific more emphasis on the S part, which is the social bit, yeah. where gender diversity becomes really more critical, and if there is a requirement on that end, that can really further facilitate more participation and access.
No, thank you, Vibhuti. And I think you brought out a very important point that we're dealing with twin issues here. On one hand, there is anyway, while there is a great push, but we need to do a lot more to just bring more climate tech, sustainability startups to the fore. And there is a lack of both sustainable and viable business models there and adequate funding going to that sector. And within that, now we're talking about also women-led ones. So there is a dual challenge we're dealing with here. I'd like to bring in Dr. Suranjali here. You're someone who has a lot of expertise in public finance and climate change policy. And as you view this, do quotas really work? Is it that we need venture capital funds and PE funds that are dedicated to climate financing, right? And then do we need those that are dedicated to only funding women? And then how do you marry the two? Secondly, is this even practical, or should we just let meritocracy play out while we influence it at other platforms and not force fit it by way of quotas?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very difficult conversation to have around earmarking certain kind of rights to individuals, because if you look at the fraction of the population that's women, that would mean that it is asking for a seat at the table at a certain level. How do you fix that number? What's palatable? I think that's a big question. I think and on the other side, the easy answer to give is to say, let's have a mindset change. I think that's going to take some time. What I do observe, though, is that there are different stages in this energy transition. If you were to sort of unpack it and look at each of these stages, right? So, for example, you have to start early on and imagine what is the new world going to look like, what are the skills that are required, and I think there is quite a bit being done there, not just in the energy sector, but beyond that as well. So, for example, if you look at the impact bond, which was issued on skilling, it has the element of gender in it, which basically focuses on, we are going to skill women in different regions, and so you have an innovative financial instrument which makes sure that the gender lens is put on. On the public finance purely, there is the practice of gender budgeting now, and it is basically providing visibility, not just to us, but also to MDBs and DFIs who are going to put more money into the market to say that we are interested, we're keen, and these are the ways in which we're going to bolster our approach. And I think that's one part of it. It looks at the grassroots level, which is education and skilling. I think beyond that, what Vibhuti just mentioned is in terms of the composition of employment in the energy-led sectors, and I would imagine these are mineral dependent, and so therefore there would be a tilt not in favor of women. The wage gap is also existent. So I think there again, there is a need for, at the corporate level, of stakeholder engagement. And how do we do that? Now there are reporting standards. Of course, reporting standards only mean that stuff gets done on paper. But I think there are large institutional investors, although may not be predominant, that are asking questions that, are you doing enough? The companies report the composition. So I think that's the next step as well, to make sure that, when they're employed, they are treated equally. You report their wages, you report, the composition of your employment. And I think when you were talking about funds and startups, I think there is an initial interest. I have seen ventures which are absolutely innovative, which are led by women. But I do understand that, when they have to sit at the table, a lot of questions are asked in addition to what may have been asked to a company which is run by men. They have to prove their worth. And I think what needs to happen here is that there may be innovation around creating catalyst funds. So let's not try and solve it by saying we're going to put, these positions or these opportunities away for a certain category. But let's talk about how can we support them in their own ways. So for example, the Mudra scheme, which the government had launched, wanted to give support to women-led enterprises in the small, medium enterprise sector. Similarly, I think there could be ventures that could be set up with funds that are which have contributions from government, could have contributions from MDBs, DFIs, all sorts of blending from private sector as well, which are allocated for ventures which could be on on a lottery basis. They're selected, or different ways to say that there is merit here already, but then this is funding dedicated to this new approach. And I think that might help more than saying that we're going to partition certain opportunities based on gender.
No, I think that's very helpful. And let's try and also understand what is lacking. And this is open to all three of you. When you today think of where the problem lies, is it lack of networking, mentorship opportunities, simply funding, or just not enough talent pipeline when it comes to women-led energy companies? Where, according to you, is that one monumental problem that we need to first resolve? Is it that women are not getting access to financing or to networking or to mentorship, or where do you think is the biggest roadblock in accelerating this? Any of you?
So it's very difficult to say, especially if we are trying to identify a project of a woman starting an energy business, and let's say she is into developing solar panels of a new generation, and she comes to the fore. And the distinction in technology is not gender-based. So you can't say that because I developed this and I'm a woman, I can get a meritocracy on this solar panel project vis-a-vis the other one. At the same time, there's a lot of dichotomy which we are trying to deal with, when we try to work in our systems and say, okay, I'll try to do something for women. A lot of us in the room would be very passionate about it and say, because this is something which I have gone through in my journey and seen that it doesn't exist, let me be that change. But we are just starting here. There have been number of instances, number of successes globally, but where does it stop from a project stage? The ground reality of a startup, agnostic of the gender of who started it, is to see it becoming a successful business model and be turned into a profit-making business. And that's where, all these elements come in. Yes, you can, government is trying to enable, platforms are being set up, networking opportunities are being seen. But it's a hard and harsh reality for most of us, if not all of us who are women in the room, is that we do have to do 1.5 times, if not more, extra to get there.
Why do you say that? Where is the problem? Why do women have to do that 1.5 times extra?
Well, one is the mindset in the ecosystem in which you work. As I say, I don't want to repeat, but it is a rarity to have this type of an audience in the room, and this should not be because it's a Savi event. This could be a balanced room because it's an energy event.
Correct.
We are trying to promote energy startups. We should have equal number of men. And I would congratulate all the men who are in the room, because you really are the agents of change. This is not the usual, Nivi is here in the room with probably somewhere, and we were doing a climate event in this very hotel in March. And Nivi and I were very worried. You all heard Ambassador Garcetti, most of you heard, that he was, our Government of India counterpart declined at the last minute. He had to sit between Nivi and me. And then on the other hand, Nivi was telling me a story that he doesn't go and do panels which are not gender balanced. So I said, what better? He is getting a 2:1 today. And so those enablers of change are not there. And every time you can't be putting that in as a conscience, because I don't want the merit of, your technology success to be because you are a woman. It has to be because you developed that technology. That's one. The other element which is very important in innovation, and this is not, again, women only, when we are helping startups and when we are trying to bring people on the forefront, is you start, you get some catalyst, you can get a grant, you can get some assistance through the various platforms which are available, and now you've launched your product in the market. Then it's the real world. And I had somebody who came up to me after a conference when I was speaking, and he said, "Where do I get next? I have developed these fabulous earphones which are state of the art, but I don't know how to get from that innovation, from that invention to that innovation journey of really capturing the market." And that is 1.5 times, certainly more, if not even further, because indeed, from the statistics which my co-panelists have given, or the harsh realities we know in the world, and Shweta, you yourself a startup, you can probably reflect best on this, is for us, it is 2 times more difficult. For us, it is 4 times more as we are coming to these events or as we're trying to put our product and technology. We also have a 24/7 full-time job to manage our homes and our families. And, we are always in this mode of multitasking. And in that, if you give that half to the family and 1 to the job, it still, it still is 1.5, though it should be 2 times. So that's how we see it, and that's why we don't see as much of the women to come forward when it is from the middle stage to the leadership stage. Come forward, let's go and get it done.
No, I love the explanation of the 1.5. It's come through really, really well. But I'll take forward what you were saying, Mehnaz, and that is the real problem. When you talk about institutional investors, at the end of the day, their job is to raise capital from, global investors, deploy that capital, and give back a return. So at the end of the day, if we don't see climate startups, sustainability startups that are scalable, that are viable, that will give them those, multi-bagger, return in terms of exits. And on top of that, there is that dual pressure of saying, oh, we want to. So what I can say is that, yes, the intent is there in the room when you are evaluating startups, right? There isn't an institutional investor who would not like to back a startup in this space, right? Whether it's the ESG space or the, the emerging energy space overall. There isn't an institutional investor who would not like to back a woman-led startup. But how do we solve for the fact that the pipeline is weak? Until we don't solve the pipeline issue, we cannot solve the financing issue. So, Vibhuti, Suranjali, do we need to do something in the run-up to getting that pipeline ready?
I think that holds irrespective it's being led by women or men. When we are talking about bankable projects, creating a pipeline of projects which offer investors some assured returns. So I think how do we create that? It's the ecosystem approach. We really need to build because there are so many risks attached. It doesn't happen that if you want to be a solar module manufacturer, you might be knowing your business or your product well. You might be providing more efficient product, but then there are so many other risks which, kind of dampens the bankability of that project, which is not something to do with your product or with the product that you are bringing on the table, but then I said the ecosystem approach. And when we talk about, women participation, I think while in certain areas we are seeing increasing role, but not in the entire supply chain. I think that's where a lot of capacity building, a lot of technical assistance for building more women who can participate in, I said, the value chain needs to be strengthened for sure.
Super. I know we have to wrap in another 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, and I want to now start taking closing thoughts from the three of you. And I think one thing is that it's a given that we need to work towards this. We seem to have identified the problem, but now I think we need to work towards solutions. And within that solution framework, if you could talk about one of the two things, either how can you in your role or how can people in this room do that one thing that would contribute towards achieving that vision, removing some of the bottlenecks, adopting, or if you're aware of any best practice in India, globally, or any other models or systems that have managed to unlock this potential in a way that, brings about that systemic policy change. So whichever of the two, either your contribution or some call to action or any best practice.
I think one of the change can be definitely, when we were talking, I think even in the earlier panel, how government or the policies can facilitate that. So maybe streamlining or I would say, especially for giving, credits to women, if the qualifying criteria can be, smoothened a little bit because they don't have history. I mean, they don't have that kind of, credit history, or they don't have those kind of collaterals to offer. I think that becomes a bottleneck at times. So maybe simplification of qualifying criteria can be one. And then definitely we do see, a lot of products coming up when it comes to sustainable financing. You have sustainability linked bond. So somewhere if there can be some elements related to gender bonds, I don't want like another color or another, attribute coming to a bond. But within the sustainability framework, if there can be a push for, giving some allocation based on gender, that would be great.
Perfect. So government intervention, policy-led intervention, you're saying. Vibhuti. Sorry, Suranjali.
Yeah, I think I think I'm not a fan of policy intervention because it just messes things up even further. I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a change, as I said, at the corporate level that might change the rules of the market in some ways. There are large corporates today, as I said, they're reporting on gender. And I think what needs to happen is that there is a market for proxy advisors. These proxy advisors should fling more questions at companies saying, what did you do last year in terms of resolving issues? Are you paying them well enough? And so what are these new ventures where you will include women? And I think there needs to be planning on how women in especially male-dominated sectors, what roles they will play, which gives us an opportunity to think about the skills that will be required, which means that all of us can contribute either through education, or even the government gets a signal on where it needs to skill, because that market is completely ill-matched. And so it would be great to understand what are these set of skills that people require to integrate into a new sort of form and a new world, economic world, I would say.
And I'd love for you to elaborate why you thought that policy intervention can mess things up, quote unquote.
No, so basically, at the end of the day, markets are going to work things out. What we do is that we create distinctions which then need to be defined further and further. And then what that creates is discontent, and there's a demand for a new definition and distinction. And I think what we can do is to change the way markets think about it in a way that it's sort of light touch. We're not saying that we should go heavy on the regulatory side, but just say that you could start throwing signals at the market. And Vibhuti has talked about, let's say, having new kinds of bonds, which again create a reporting requirement. So there are these orange bonds which are being issued in the UK on gender-based projects. So you could have nice sort of signaling in the market that this is what is being done in terms of transparency.
Yes, please.
I'm like, definitely market should be the real driver. It's just that during the initial push is where the government policies or regulation can play a role. Once, there is some level of confidence, you should leave it to the market. You can't, it's not a sustainable thing, but maybe the initial push.
No, I think there's no right or wrong there. I mean, an initial policy intervention, light touch, as you were saying, could be the right way, or as you're saying, just signaling is good enough, right? You don't need to necessarily have the intervention. Mehnaz, any thoughts around this sort of debate, or your own ideas on best practices, or how you think we can achieve that vision?
So, often we wonder on our side when we conduct these fully funded study tours, workshops, training, especially the invitations for our sector experts from our partner countries to come to US, and including invitations for events like these from our counterparts. Why don't we get women nominations? Why is it that a woman is always pushed behind? It has been that probably I was taking an assessment or a stock with the head of USTDA, who's also a woman, one day that probably of the 35 missions in my career I have conducted between US and India, I have had 6 to 8 women at max. That's a very striking number for, you to look at that. Why is it, what is it that we are not doing correctly? Of course, I can't, gender the technical mission to say, please, of these 15 delegates you're sending on this reverse trade mission for USTDA, fully funded by USTDA, make sure you have 5 women. Doesn't work like that. Doesn't, diplomatically also not correct. But that is a challenge. Why do we not see that coming forward? And is there a way to directly push or slowly nurture it from within? And I think what we came about to in the discussions we've been having internally, and I'm really open to getting ideas from the others, is start nudging it slowly in the system to nurture, so network and connect. If I'm in a role to have the capacity to invite 5 entrepreneurs from India, can I make a conscious attempt that of those invitations, 2 are going out to women? Maybe 1 will accept. I have made some change. So I think it's very important. And the other is that if you are in a leadership role, which a lot of you in the room today would be, or in an influencer role in whatever way, please let this come out nicely as a thought, which maybe the other side of the table has never thought of it while allocating a startup project, while financing a startup project, is to also not to have that lens and become biased towards it. Please don't. I think women have enough meritocracy to prove for themselves in the market, and I totally agree with it. And I really like a professor coming out with saying, no policy interventions. That means, it's really on the right thought what she says, and I totally agree with that as well. But that inherent capacity for us to get up and connect and say, I welcome Wes, who's been an old colleague, and now I see him in his New Jersey role here. But please make that connect when you are connecting with your partner. You may not think of yourself as an influencer or a leader, but maybe the other person has never thought about it, and the other person may be a decision maker, a woman on the other side. If you can enable some of that networking and connecting ability, you will be allowing some women, some more women, and not having an exclusive, woman-led or a woman-thought-of process, but getting them more integrated in the system. And I would just add one last thing, because one thing in leadership, women leadership, which we are also trying to promote, is that this is probably not our day job. Our day job is to do the work which we are allocated to do, right? And that has not been given to me based on my gender. It has been given to me based on, whatever meritocracy I have. But please, men and women have to take that. Now the time has come. And I requested this to a Government of India counterpart who works with me on our, bilateral cooperation. I said 33% in the Parliament of India by 29. Would you really like to see those women leaders coming from all spheres on the table? And that can start with some of the missions which we host, or some of the trainings and workshops which we conduct. Is we can't mandate it, but probably please think a little more deeply. And that was a woman on the other side, and she agreed, and she said immediately, 25% should be women coming on to these missions or trainings from India. That 25, even if it is 10, I will be very happy. Because after 13 years of my service in the government, I can still, say 5% has been a very up mark, which we've been able to see in energy space to get women on the table.
That's huge progress, and I think progress for whether we are being able to achieve some of these goals will reflect in next year at Savi, when we're going to see Mehnaz tell us that she had a problem of plenty. Yeah, and while she was choosing, the women who she had to send on the delegation, and while it wasn't one or two accepting, but many who were jostling for that spot. And I can shamelessly plug our own startup. We're just a month old in terms of an industry alliance. We're called the Startup Policy Forum. And we have, startups as members, and we help them in policy advocacy because we feel that India was lacking. While I think the current government has really put startups on the national agenda, what was lacking is the startup voice in the policy-making ecosystem, and we are trying to bridge that gap. And I would say success would be if I have at least more than one woman-led energy company as a member, as part of SPF's membership. So I think we clearly have goals to achieve, and I'm hoping that without compromising meritocracy, we are able to bring in, gender inclusivity in the energy ecosystem, and I think that would be the main aim. With that, I think we wrap up this session, but thank you very much, Mehnaz, Dr. Suranjali, and Vibhuti for sharing your thoughts, and it's been a very thought-provoking session. Thank you.